Board of Selectmen. I am Robin Hunter, Chair, and I am present.
Bob Springer, present.
John Jeffries, present.
The first item on the agenda, as usual, is citizens' comments. So are there any citizens' comments? Since there are none, we had hoped during this segment to introduce Rick Russell, who is acting as an HR consultant for us in the town of Dover. He's running a little late, so when he is available, I will introduce him at an appropriate time. But
Robin, before we move to item number one, can I just mention that the Board of Selectmen received a very nice thank you note from the Dover Church with regards to a topic that was on our last subject, a subject that was in our last meeting on December 27th. And I would like, I'll forward it to Mona, and if Mona could put it up on our notes or our website. It was just a very nice thank you for our ongoing efforts with regards to the Dover Church's neighbor and the businesses and the traffic that affect the church.
okay, thank you, John. So the first item of business is the 2023 annual town meeting warrants. And I don't know, it's another large meeting, I guess. There are 35 warrants again. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris and let him present the warrant.
Thanks, Robin. Can everyone see this Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah, this is great. It's a good size too.
Perfect. Okay. So there have been a few small changes to this list since you saw it last.
Hey, Chris, I have the project status summary. Are we talking about warrant articles?
Yeah, is that not what's on there?
I see.
No, that's why it looked so good.
Yeah, you have the project status summary up, not the warrant article list.
Okay. Let me just adjust that. Sorry about that. That should do it.
Yep.
Excellent.
That's a good size too.
Excellent. All right, so as I was saying, there's just been a few additions since the board saw this last 2 weeks ago. I'll just go down in order. The first new addition is Article 17 here. That's been submitted by the Park and Recreation Commission. And this is an article to appropriate for community center recreation items. The intent of this article is, as described by what was submitted by the commission, is to appropriate for the recreational based items that may potentially be excluded from any final bid docs or at alternate decisions once bids are received related to the community center building project. Next up, Articles 18 through 23 are the planning board articles as submitted by the planning board last week. We had a few placeholders on the list the last time we met, but here are the articles listed out that the planning board intends to bring forward this year. Nothing new in terms of warrant articles that we didn't see as proposed articles last year. Next up.
So what is the difference between 20 and 21?
So I understand that the planning board may be interested in putting forward 2 different articles based on the threshold of vote and the changes that are occurring in that particular bylaw. I do see the planning board chair on the meeting. Happy to defer to her if the board has further questions and if she's okay with that.
Sure, I'm here if there are any questions.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand, the wording looks identical.
Right. So the state over the last couple of years has passed a whole bunch of state laws that promote more housing options in the towns and cities of Massachusetts. And they have made some bylaws relative to housing approved by 50% versus the normal 2/3 vote that one needs for a zoning bylaw. So until this is all part of the work that's being done by our consultant, and it started with the workshop on 12/10. So until we see the actual bylaw recommendations from our consultant and decide which ones to proceed with, we don't know whether there'll be bylaw aspects that are 50% and or 75%. And we've been informed by council that it's you cannot approve 50% and 75% and I'm sorry, not 75%, 2/3. So you can't approve 50% and 2/3 bylaws in the same warrant article. So we might find that there are changes to the zoning bylaws that we can get approved with a 50% vote at town meeting. And then there might be changes that require a 2/3 vote. So by showing two for Village Center at this time, it gives us the flexibility to address both.
Okay.
And we'll have a better feel for that, over the next 30 to 45 days as we drill down into the bylaw recommendations.
Okay. So, I mean, my observation is just given this town's history with zoning bylaw articles, we are looking at a very, very long town meeting.
Well, Article 19, as it's currently listed, the floodplain overlay district should be very, very quick by state law. If residents that live in the floodplain districts of Dover want to get insurance, then the town has to approve the new state bylaw for floodplains. So that should be pretty simple. But I agree that Article 18, the accessory dwelling units, and then anything we propose for the village center are issues that we will be reaching out to the community as many times as we can between now and then. But will, of course, take up an awful lot of conversation, I think, at town meeting, which is probably one of the meeting reasons that our zoning bylaws are so antiquated.
Okay. Thanks, Carol.
I would just say that Article 22 and 23, again, it falls into the same issue of until we see the actual bylaw recommendations and choose what to proceed with, we may need to break them out into schedule of use and definitions like we did last year. So it's just a placeholder.
Okay. Yeah, and I just think 20 and 21, it's just going to add confusion. But, if that's the law, that ones that require 50% vote need to be in one warrant, and those requiring 2/3 vote need to be in a separate warrant, we really don't have a choice.
No, we don't have a choice. And if you remember, it's one of the reasons we had to pull the ADU bylaw last year, because our previous town planner had combined the two into one bylaw.
I forgot about that, but I remember the bylaw being pulled, right? Yep. All right, thank you. Chris.
Thank you.
So the next article that is new on the list, but one that we've seen before, is 24 from the Conservation Commission. And this is just to update their fee schedule so that their internal policy fee schedule aligns with the actual enabling legislation, which is the town's bylaw. As you recall, this was actually folded into the buffer zone article that was presented and ultimately defeated at last year's town meeting. So they're coming back to address the fee article this year. And then second to last here is Article 25. And these would be amendments to our regulatory bylaws surrounding stormwater. There's been some changes related to MS4 requirements that our stormwater engineer consultants have recommended to the town. So Kevin McCabe, our DPW director, is soliciting those with town departments, our town engineer to get feedback, and will then review with town council and finalize the language. But it's been requested that these changes be made this year. And lastly, I'd mentioned it last meeting, but it wasn't on the list. Article 30 here from the Capital Budget Committee. The committee took a vote last month to amend the bylaw regarding their committee membership. As the board recalls, there's a member of the Long Range Planning Committee that sits on the Capital Budget Committee, and given the inactiveness of the Long Range Planning Committee, the Capital Budget Committee would really like to have another at-large member appointed to the committee to be able to bring them up to a full complement. So that would require, again, a bylaw change to adjust their membership.
So Chris, that would be 4 at-large, 2 members from Warrant, and a member of the Board of Selectmen, 7 people?
It would remain 7 people. And the way that it has been presented by the Capital Budget Committee, yes, it would be a 4th at-large member.
Right, so usually what happened where there were 2 warrant committee members, one from long range planning, one from warrant, you know, the liaison from long range planning. I think that's how it usually went.
Close. I think it was Planning Board had a member who had also attended the Long Range Planning meeting, and it was that particular person who was the missing member right now.
Okay, right.
As you have this conversation, not to add things to the plate and then leave, but I think this is a good time to, I guess, answer the question or pose the question. Does it make sense to revisit the Long Range Planning Committee, which is, again, its own bylaw in the town code? And, if you're making changes to other committees who have appointments from the Long Range Planning Committee, do you just address the Long Range Planning Committee at the same time?
Well, that's a good point. Something we should look at, right?
We haven't had a long-range planning committee in 4 years. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's about right. 3 or 4 years.
6 years.
No.
No, it was at 3, I think. But
Right, because the last thing the long range planning did was they were the ones that did all the work for the green communities.
Chris, what were the other committees? One came from Open Space, maybe?
On Long Range Planning?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
One was Selectmen, one was Warrant. I'm just going back from memory when I served on it. Planning
Board, and I think then there were a couple of at-large members.
Yeah.
at large.
It's okay. That's a good point, though, Chris. Yes.
Yeah.
Bob, it was
Yeah, one board, one planning board, and then 5 members appointed by the moderator. That's the code.
I would note that the last project, as Robin mentioned, of the Green Communities Act, the only reason they got involved was because there was a need to find a group of people that could do it, and they had nothing else to do.
Right, and they did a fantastic job and were extremely motivated, and then there really wasn't another project.
Okay.
So if the board wishes, you can take a vote tonight if you want to have me add a placeholder just to get that in before the warrant closes. You can always withdraw it later down the road before you finalize the warrant in February. If you wanted to take this up.
I think that's a good idea, Chris, because it's in keeping with a lot of the initiatives that we're doing, and it'd give us the placeholder, it'd give us the opportunity to discuss it at our next couple of meetings, and then from a modernization and it is, I think it is in line with several of the topics that we're addressing this year. That's my thought, Robin. What do you think?
It's always safer to put it on than not have it on, so it gives us an option. So I will make a motion to have the town administrator add a warrant article to the town meeting warrant to, would it be for removal of the long-range planning bylaw?
I'll just keep it open-ended, amend
Okay.
the long-range planning, and that way you can amend it,
Okay.
remove it.
All right, perfect.
Second,
All in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
hi, Bob Springett.
Hi, John Jeffries.
Well, now we're at 35.
Let's see if we can get to 40.
40.
So other than that, the only other update is that the petitioner for the citizen petition number 32 for the sidewalks on Cross Street has the actual petition forms. He knows of the warrant closure deadline of the 13th, and so assuming he gets those back to us, that'll be on there. And so that's what we're looking at this point for the annual town meeting warrant. As the board knows, this is just our placeholder list, and you'll have the next 2 months to have conversations with the petitioners, and finally determine what you want on the warrant once you finalize the actual warrant in February.
Right, so I see the town moderator and assistant moderator are participating in the meeting. So Jim or Dave, do you have any comments?
And okay, I think I'm on mute. Can people hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I nothing in particular. I mean, I think ideally we should be a little bit concerned about the length of the meeting, the number of warrant articles. I worry that if we have to go into a second night, that we're going to have a very difficult time making a quorum. And I also worry about keeping people in the auditorium late for the first night, losing a quorum. So all things being equal, I understand that there are a lot of important town issues that you're grappling with, but all things being equal, consistent with what the point I think Bob was making, and you as well, Robin, it would be helpful to try to minimize any additions to the warrant article. One other thought that has occurred to me, and that is with respect to the fee schedule for the Concom. I'm wondering if they have had a chance to air that at a hearing. I understand that it's pretty pro forma, but I think that it would be helpful if they are able to try to contact people who might be affected by this and just air it with some of the citizens so that they can get some feedback before the town meeting. And I understand that it's something it would be just consistent with the bylaw, but still, I think that in order to try to reduce the amount of time that we spend at the meeting discussing things that could have been discussed ahead of time, that would be helpful. And lastly, I would like to thank Carol Lisbon. She's been making an incredible effort for outreach on the planning board. And I really, Dave Havlin and I both greatly appreciate her efforts to do that, because that's another way that we can try to keep the town meeting within a manageable time. So thank you, Carol. Dave, you can pick up. I probably missed some important stuff here, so go right ahead.
No, I think you got most of it, Jim. A quick question, I think for Bob, if I may, and that is the citizens petition. Has the sponsor been told of all of the rules? Not rules are too strong a word, but the process of getting that fully vetted, so when it gets to town meeting, it's not the first time that neighbors and or other citizens have heard it. Is that petition moving the same way that Jim's referring to?
I'm gonna punt, Dave. In theory, the answer is yes, but the guy who probably knows more about it at this juncture is Chris. So I would think that when the petitioner, part of when the guidelines for the petitioner would include the insistence on outreach to the community. So Chris, just correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, as petitioners come forward with their interest, we let them know what the full process is. We focus at the front end at this period of time, what it takes to just get the petition on the warrant as a placeholder. And then once they submit the signatures and those are verified by the town clerk, we then follow up with the petitioner to give them the actual the checklist of essentially requirements that they need to do leading up to town meeting.
Wonderful. And when we had the meeting with some of the selectmen, Jim, myself, Felicia, what we're trying to get is if we're going to try and facilitate each article having the greatest chance of success, to then make sure that all the pre-work that can be done before town meeting is done, so that when people walk in, it's not this, gee, I never heard of this. What is this? Just to try and give us the greatest possible chance of finishing up in one evening. And then I echo what Jim says about what the planning board is trying to do. I just wish it could be done over a couple of meetings, because it would just be less onerous on the whole meeting itself, but it doesn't look like they have a chance to do that. So yeah, here we go.
Hey, Jim, Dave, one of the things that has been continues to be an issue for everyone at town meeting is motions to reconsider. And that, the last town meeting, we had a motion to reconsider. And how is there a procedural way to address motions to reconsider? Because with the number of planning board bylaws, with the number of bylaws that are going to directly affect citizens, I see this as many potential reconsideration calls.
Yeah, John, yeah, it's a good point. As you know, the motion to reconsider is part of our town bylaw. So we are required to allow motions to reconsider. I have the discretion, however, if that opportunity is abused by, for example, one citizen making repeated motions to reconsider the same warrant article, I can rule that out of order. But
last year, the proponent for the article that was moved to reconsider was the same proponent of the article.
That's right, and they're allowed to do that. That's well within the scope of the motion to reconsider. And in fact, I believe there's case law on that permits that to happen. In effect, our town bylaw, and I might add that I think every other town that I'm familiar with has a similar provision. It's something that came in the late 1800s in several towns in the Commonwealth. But everybody has the right to ask for a new vote if they want. And the way that we've dealt with it in Dover traditionally over the last 30 years or so is to ask that only new information be brought to the town floor before we vote on the motion to reconsider, in order to reduce the amount of time that's spent on the motion to reconsider. In other words, we try to avoid rehashing the entire debate. But it is well within the right of people to do that. And that's why, traditionally, and I intend this year to revert back to our tradition of explaining the rules of conduct, because I think we'll have a little bit more time, since we're a little bit somewhat post-COVID, although the numbers are coming in a little daunting again. But I do intend to spend time this town meeting going over the rules and explaining the motions, including the motion for reconsideration.
So Jim, the only thing is it has to be brought within a certain amount of time.
Well, no, it's interesting. The town bylaw has two rules. One is that if it's brought within 30 minutes of the initial vote, it only requires a majority to move to a reconsideration, where if it's brought more than 30 minutes after the vote, it requires a 2/3 vote. And it's kind of interesting, I never understood the wisdom behind that. bylaw provision, because it always seemed to me to encourage an immediate motion to reconsider, which in my view is a waste of time, but people may disagree about that. I never understood the underlying policy rationale for that 30-minute reduced quorum, reduced vote requirement.
Maybe just encouraging to happen sooner rather than later.
I always thought it was to make sure you still had a quorum.
Well, yeah, but remember, anybody can challenge the existence of a quorum. So I don't know. It's interesting. An interesting thought, John.
Thanks, Jim.
Jim, have you given any thought with Dave, as we've done during the COVID portions of the meeting, to group some of the selectmen budgetary into a consent agenda type format? That was extremely effective in the COVID meetings, and I thought that was very well received by our constituents. In fact, nobody complained to me about that, and the only feedback that I got from it was really well received.
Yeah, now we hope to do that again, and we'll be looking to you, the select board, to let us know which items that you think we should put together, with an eye to grouping together articles that you expect are not controversial. So
1 through 17.
Well, 1 through 16.
I'm sorry, 1 through
17
16.
requires a
Yeah.
vote.
Right.
If you think that's politically feasible, we'll certainly entertain it.
We'll have to get back to you on that, but that's
Well, I mean, these are all standard. They're things that we've done before.
Right.
And if there is a question on any of them, we can certainly provide additional information.
Yeah, so I think I'm certainly happy to do that, and let's try to as we proceed through February, let's try to get a better idea to make sure that we don't have something that people would want to consider separately. And if it looks like that's the case, then I see no problem with proceeding to try and to bundle as many of the articles together for a single vote as possible in order to save time.
the part that I think is really time saving, Jim, is you read through all of the items that are capital. And I don't know if there's a way around that. And if there is a way around that, that's a big time chunk of the first 16. It's probably a solid 45 minutes to an hour of that, of the first 16 is just based upon what you read asking for a hold. And typically the people who ask for a hold just want some type of explanation, and the explanation is always, in my experience, and Robin's got the same number of years of experience, is a very simple explanation. And
So John, these are all excellent suggestions, and what I would suggest we do is set up a working group meeting to discuss various ways to allow town meeting to spend time on those warrant articles that require more information to the town and group those that don't together. So I would suggest we set up a working team to address all of these suggestions, and that we continue to have the conversation as we figure out which of these articles are really going to be brought forward to town meeting and which are not. And also as we have a sense of what could potentially be controversial.
Yeah, Robin, that's right. The only way to really make an informed decision is if we start getting feedback from the public, from residents.
Right.
Otherwise, we're just shooting in the dark.
Right. But I think these are all excellent suggestions. So, I would like to move on to the next item of business, but prior to doing that, I'm going to turn it back over to the town administrator to introduce Rick Reed, who has made it to the meeting. So good evening, Rick, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting.
So while Rick gets himself set up, thanks, Robin. Appreciate it. We wanted to just take a quick opportunity to introduce to the full board, Rick. I think you've all met him this afternoon at the farewell party, but Rick's joining us from Bedford. He's serving as our interim assistant town administrator, human resources director for the next few months, focused on assisting the town with the recruitments that we have that are open, some of the day-to-day HR matters, and some other special projects that the town Carl may have. So we're really fortunate to have Rick here with us. He served as Bedford's town manager for over 30 years. So he knows his stuff, he knows the business, and I think he'll be a great resource for the community. And of course, thank you to Carl for recruiting him here.
So welcome, Rick.
Well,
Today, when I was talking to Chris, he said, you know, this would have been a really easy gig had he decided to stay on, because he has all of these experts walking around the town hall, so he would have to make no decisions. So we are really honored to have such a seasoned group helping us out. So really welcome to the town, and we'd love to learn a little bit about you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be of assistance to you. It's not something I have done since I retired 4 years ago. As Chris said, I was town manager in Bedford, used to be called town administrator when I was first brought on board in 1988. We have a charter in Bedford, and the charter was changed to turn it into a town manager job. And prior to coming to Bedford and in fact Massachusetts, I was out of graduate school and eventually an assistant city manager for the city of Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is in Montgomery County, Maryland. So I have that experience for Gaithersburg and also here in Bedford for the 30 years here. So I'm retired now, live here in Bedford. Presently, actually have a few grandkids living with us, similar to Carl, actually. And
So that's why you came out of retirement.
Exactly, Robin, exactly.
He needs some peace and quiet.
I was careful to the hours and days on days, which I think I won't be needed as much at home. But anyway, with my wife's permission, she said, yes, go ahead and serve. So I'm interested and happy to do it. And the stuff that I've already been involved with just in the 2 days I've been here is very much familiar to me, because we've had similar personnel classification systems and whatnot in Bedford. So it's not really hard for me to get up and running very quickly. So I have a few vacations that were scheduled. So there'll be a week between Wednesday and the following Wednesday that I'm away, and then actually in February for 3 weeks. But I will, after between those two trips and then after the one that will be mid-March by that point, I'll be here Tuesdays and Thursdays helping out.
Well, that's great, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Look forward to working with Rich. Thank you. Is it Rich?
Rick.
Rick, okay.
Yeah, and my birth name is Richard, but my nickname is Rick.
All right, we'll work with Rick. Thank you. Welcome
Yep.
aboard.
Yep,
Thank you.
welcome. I don't know, Chris, you're missing out.
I
So the next item on the agenda is the operating budget, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Robin. Just wanted to take an opportunity to share with the board a few of the operating budget changes that have come in since we had our last preview 2 weeks ago. There are two changes. One is we received a preliminary assessment from Minuteman for $51,000 increase. Again, this is a preliminary estimate at this point, but it comes directly from the school as opposed to our estimates that we use going into the initial budget setting process. So the board knows The total assessment is $248,781. This has been updated in our budget model and all the other materials that we use throughout the budget process. I will say that it's a approximately $30,000 increase over what we had originally estimated 2 weeks ago. And secondly, the library budget has, the library and the library trustees have submitted a request to change the number of hours that their part-time non-benefited employees work by 1 hour each, so that they become benefit eligible employees. This is a small increase to the library's operating budget at about $8,000. But should that change take effect, that will have an impact on the town's health insurance and retirement budgets, which we do not have figures for. The library presented their proposal to the warrant committee last week or the week before. And it sounded like the library was going to come back, do a little bit more digging into the details about their proposal from an operating need, and then continue the discussion leading up toward the budget being finalized and toward town meeting. So those are the two proposed changes to the budget at this point that we've seen. So we typically, after we start things off in December, we have a few meetings where the board just has a operating budget, open-ended agenda to have a conversation or take votes on particular things. If there are no questions or no further discussion on this item, the warrant committee will be starting their hearings in earnest in the next few weeks. And then everything will get packaged up and sent to the board later in the winter.
Right, so I think, with respect to the library classification change, it would be interesting, and I don't know if it's our place or if we have Warren do this, but it's certainly, I would like to understand the catalyst for this. Were there issues hiring qualified individuals? Why the classification changed now when the library has been, and I'm just assuming, I could be completely wrong, running very effectively with the classifications that they had in place. So, perhaps we could schedule the library, the head librarian or the trustees to come and just discuss what's driving this change in classification, because certainly there's a significant cost increase, and I certainly would like to understand why now. What is this a result of a problem that they're having that they're trying to resolve? I think that would be important information for us to have.
Okay. Yeah, we can get that on the schedule. I do understand from the director that this originated at the request of the staff, but the director and the trustees have identified, some benefits as to making this change. But
right. For me, Bob and John, I don't know if you think it's appropriate to do this ahead of Warrant's review, because I'm certainly believe Warrant will ask the same questions, but I would just like to understand the catalyst for the change.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking it should be done, let warrant committee go through its
Okay.
process.
Yeah.
Then the left hand said, well, it would be interesting to understand sort of the perspective of the leadership at the library, as well as I'm always interested in what are other communities look like.
Yeah.
Other like communities, to get a sense of sort of overall staffing as well as compensation. So I'm happy to have a separate meeting, or I'm happy to wait till the warrant is done, or I'm happy to do both, Madam Chair.
Right. What I was thinking, maybe I will talk to the chair of the warrant committee and see, maybe there are a number of budgets where it makes sense for there to be a joint meeting between the Board of Selectmen and warrant, where there are significant changes and we can all get the same presentation at the same time.
Yeah, okay. There is the operating budget, the operating budget is going up a little bit. There's some staffing increases there, so that might make sense as well. John?
I agree. I think there's an opportunity for them to vet. Whether we do one or the other, they're still going to do their job and vet it. So I think in the interest of time and efficiency, that we do a combination of what you both just mentioned. Let Warrant do their thing, and Robin reach out and see if there's an opportunity where that not only the library but other budgetary items that are going to come to our attention through Warrant are something we can do in a joint meeting.
Right, because I could see there being a discussion about capital, because capital
Yes, absolutely,
is
absolutely.
really high, right?
Yes.
So, at a minimum, those two items. I'll reach out to Melissa Herman, who's the chairman.
Yeah, just on the subject of capital, I mean, it's going to be incredibly important that people understand the asks, because there are some relatively large numbers, and we have limited to how we can fund those.
Mhm.
And there's limits to how we can stretch those items out over time, given the age of some of the equipment being replaced. So yeah, I think highlighting what's going on in capital ourselves, as well as the capital budget committee, would be very, very helpful.
All right. So Chris, you don't have to do anything. I'll contact the chair of Warren, and then I'll coordinate with Carl.
Wait a minute, we have until 12 o'clock tonight, don't we?
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night. There's the whole day and a half.
No,
Right.
actually, technically, we only have them until 3:59 tomorrow.
Oh, John, I wanted to go to midnight.
No, I found the key to the front door tonight, and we're going to have them do the walk like the governor out the front door. 3:59 tomorrow.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. And Carl, I assume you'll just keep us updated. When do we expect to have the free cash number certified?
Mr.
If I had to make an estimate at this point, let me just think this through out loud. We're probably going to be into March before we have
Okay.
free cash.
Okay. All right.
Has that been the standard? I was guessing February, but maybe March.
I can never remember. That's why I asked the
I
question.
know, that's a
Yeah.
good question.
We're not where we should be timing wise. It should be early in the calendar year. We're still digging out a little bit on some of our closing out the fiscal year, which has pushed it back. Again, I think in the March timeframe.
Okay.
Bob, historically, it's been the end of January, certainly February, that we've had the certified free cash. There have been years where we had it right at the beginning of the year. So
Yeah, well, there's obviously there's been some changes that have impacted the timeline. So
yeah, and I know this is somewhat public, but Mark has had been short-staffed because his assistant has been hospitalized for a few days. So I've been keeping an eye on it. As you both know, most of the people on the call know, I worked with Mark in Wellesley, and he's a great guy, and he's on top of that department. So like many others, working shorthanded. So Carl, I'm sure he'll be on top of it as fast as he can.
Oh, I'm sure. Carl is just moving an office away. So.
That's right.
So the next, thank you, everyone. The next item on the agenda is the Board of Selectmen membership size committee review and potential vote. Just as some background information, there were some questions that arose from the public about the appointment process. What we have done so far is appoint 6 of the 7 members. The members that were appointed are David Perez, Kate Canny, Jim Dolly, Laverne Lovell, Mark Sorrow, and Carolyn Ringel. This evening, the purpose of the discussion this evening is just to review the process that the Board of Selectmen followed, and with respect to the committee, and then devise a path forward for nomination of or appointment of the final member. So when the questions came in from the public about the process, I had a conversation with the board, with the town administrator, and asked how the list was pulled together. So I was told the following, that as everybody knows, the Board of Selectmen had reached out. We received one volunteer, Rick Forte. Other than that, there weren't really, we did not receive any interest from the community at large. James Stewart, who was the sponsor at town meeting of this study committee, reached out to members of the community and gave the town administrator, or the office of the Board of Selectmen, a list of 13 individuals that he said would be interested in serving on the committee. Mona then called all 13 individuals to validate whether or not they were still interested on serving on the committee. 9 of the 13 expressed their interest, and that list was provided to the Board of Selectmen liaison. Some of the individuals that were appointed were on the list. Others were from outreach at large by the Board of Selectmen liaison. So that's how the process worked. And then John, you can talk about the process you used with the list that you received from the Board of Selectmen's office, as well as your own personal outreach to members of the community at large.
Okay, thank you, Robin. So everything, Robin, that you just described is exactly correct. The only thing that I can add to color or give everybody a little bit more depth is when there were no volunteers, or when there was just the one volunteer, James Stewart and I had 2 conversations, and we agreed that James would formulate a list, I would formulate a list. So again, what Robin just described is exactly correct. James gave his list to Mona. I did not give a list to Mona because I was the one that was essentially going to call these people. So here's the second part of this that adds a little bit of color. Of the 6 people, as Robin said, that we had selected, those 6 people were known to the Board of Selectmen, certainly to me, and I immediately began contacting the people on James's list because I wanted to go through, as we've always done in the past. So the one person that, as Robin mentioned, had volunteered, I reached out to Mona and to Chris to get a contact information from Rick. They gave me Rick's email. I sent the letter, the same notice that we sent to everybody on my list and James' list, and we didn't get a response from Rick. We tried to get a phone number. We didn't get a phone number. So the one person that volunteered did not have the opportunity to interact with me or James. So that's how that happened. That one person that happened. So
right, so the good news is I was able to connect with him, and I do have a telephone number for him, and he did express he would still be interested in serving on the committee if there were spots.
So here's what I would suggest, Robin, that we do, because there are people on James's list who did not get contact. there are the majority of people on my list that I did not contact. And what I also want to make very clear and remind everybody is the people who we did, there were people who we contacted who we did not move forward, who were part of the 6 people.
Right, and that's always going to be the case. You know,
Exactly.
it's a good problem to have if you have too many volunteers.
What I feel very badly about is this, how do we move forward? Because we did have one person that was on my list who I did contact, who is very well qualified. And I think to be fair to that person, what I would like to do is to have Bob or Robin or somebody, and to make it perfectly fair to those other people, Bob or Robin, I will give you the list of my people, you have the list of the people who were not contacted. We have one remaining, and I think to be fair to everybody and to make it equitable for all those people is if Bob or Robin contact an agreed upon number of those people, and then come back to how do we move the last person for the last member of this committee forward. So,
All right, so
I don't know, what do you both think about that?
I think, Bob, you're on mute, but if you're not going to say the same thing as me, I'm going to cut you off. So I'll let you go first.
All right. Well, listen,
Shocking.
I think we're skipping a step, right? I mean, what I would like to do is make sure that we understand and agree what the process, what were the holes in the process that we executed. I'd like to know how many people were not contacted. And then I'd like to, when you get to next steps, if there are corrections that need to be made to the process that we went through, then we should identify those corrections. And then
So,
moving forward, we actually have a process to work. And then,
Right.
then I think you can talk about what do we do next.
Right. So Bob, I think what happened was because the Board of Selectmen's office called the 13 individuals on the list they received and asked if those individuals were still interested in serving, those individuals all expected to receive a call from the Board of Selectmen liaison member.
Okay, so that was 9, right? There was 9 people who, after
Right.
Mona's call.
Right.
Only,
So I think that's where the disconnect happened. So, you know, in the past, and we've never really formalized this process, but in the past, everybody that's volunteered, if I was the liaison, I just always called everybody. I did not necessarily select everybody because I could only select so many people. And you know what we always try to do on these committees is get a cross section of the community.
so Robin,
And usually when I've gone back to individuals to say there isn't a spot, they've said, oh, that's great. I didn't really have the time, but I volunteered because I thought you needed people. So thanks a lot. But
Okay, so John, how many people did you?
Well,
Right now, my universe is 9.
Okay, no, that's true. But let me just add one thing to Robin. When we've done this in the past, we have gotten volunteers. We didn't get volunteers.
Yeah, we agree.
James got his people. I got my people.
Right.
And Mona never saw my people.
Right. So how many people are that?
Well, there's on my list.
Yeah.
12.
You had 12.
On
So
my
you-
list. So, but Bob here. So I know you can see this at home, but this is the email and the list that Mona gave me from James. These are the people on my list.
was there duplicates?
Yes. Yeah.
So, great.
So there's duplicates, and this is very important for people to know. The majority of the people of the 6 came from James's list, and there were only 2 people of the 9 who were not called on James's list. The majority of the people who were not called are on my list. So where I'm again going back to this is we need one more person. And there's 2 people on James's list. There's there are 2 people on my list that were disqualified because we've already covered this. There are 2 people who no longer live in Dover. Angus Leary, who's the president of Suffolk Construction, and Candace McCann, who's a former selectman. So those 2 people who are on my list are disqualified. So my recommendation or my suggestion is, again, that to get the last person,
We should call everybody that
we should
wasn't called.
call everybody who is still remaining who has not been contacted.
Yeah, but we also need to have one list. I mean,
Right,
on a
so-
going forward basis, we need one
Right.
list.
Right, so we should take the list,
And
cross
here's
out the
one other thing.
duplicates, put together one list, and anybody that hasn't been appointed yet, or we should just call. And then also for those individuals that have been appointed, we could also call and make sure they still want to do this now that we have a big list.
Well, that's a good point. So in the past, the most recent time that we've done this was for when I was the chairman of the board in 2018. We needed candidates for the Carroll Study Committee. We submitted nominations for consideration. This is my email to Ford on October 3rd, 2018. I submitted this list to Ford. Ford was the one that did the review. And Ford, Bob, I think you submitted a list, and Robin, I think you submitted a list because.
I don't think I submitted a list.
So that's how. That was the most recent time that we've done this, and that's how we did it. We submitted it to Ford.
No, that's not how it worked. Ford and I had contacted people. Ford and I sat down and went through the names, and then we interviewed. I interviewed a slew of people, and then ultimately we discussed qualifications in terms of.
Right.
And then we came up with a list that we ultimately presented.
Did you interview everybody on all the lists, Bob?
Everybody whose names we interviewed. Not me personally. I interviewed some. Ford interviewed some, but we had a shared set of characteristics of what we expected to have in people. And one of the most important ones was we were looking at that point in time, because the first study was really an analytical study. We were looking for people with analytical skill sets and sort of no real feel for what they thought was open-minded. So they had skills and they had experience, and but it was an analytical exercise. At the time, we looked at all of the options around the Carroll building. We looked at the different past studies, and that's how we ultimately came back to the idea of making the pitch to the town about, you can do A, or you could do B, or you could do C. So, yeah, but yes, we did do and then I think we actually had like CVs from people. So it was a pretty thorough exercise. And then in addition to that, in addition to having the people, then we expanded the project team to include sort of stakeholders from the town, but that was a little bit later on in the process. The original half dozen or so came out of work that Ford and I both did.
Okay, so based upon this discussion, especially with their, ultimately there's going to be a new generation of selectmen.
Yes.
We should start putting together, some of these policies and procedures
how-to
that
guide.
we just take for granted and have never been documented. And this is one of these. So I would like to suggest that I think John's suggestion is a good one. Let's take the lists, let's figure out who is on the list by combining the two lists. We should call people on the list because
Haven't
we
been
need one
called.
position. And I would also suggest we could go back to people that we have appointed
Yes.
and say, do you still have the time? Is this something you still want to do? Especially if there's more than one qualified candidate on the remaining, for the remaining volunteers. And then we can get started on this. The other thing we also had discussed was the fact that there are a lot of really important projects that each of us are spearheading right now, and that to take a look at where we're spending our time to divvy up the work a little more evenly. And Bob, your plate came up less full than the rest of ours. So John and I were thinking that maybe you could take this over because, you know, there's Hale is going to be a huge lift and really important. And so I think it just makes sense. We always try and make sure that things are equally divided.
I feel like I'm back in the Army.
Yeah, you clearly are. I agree with that, and I think it's a very fair and equitable solution for everybody involved. And I just want to, express, first of all, thank you for the people who want to be a part of this.
Exactly.
I also just want to make very clear to everybody that James and I had these conversations we had 2 conversations prior to the list and calling, and one after, when James called me and said, there are 3 people who I don't know. And who are they? So I explained who they are. And we're both fine with that. So I do think we have 7. I think all the people that we've proposed are very qualified. I feel very badly for the last person who was proposed and not approved, because he is a former selectman, he lives in town, he fits all the qualifications. But I do agree with what you've both said, that the process was not the same as it was in the past, because for a lot of reasons, we
got no one.
We got no one. We had no, it was like the Army. We went and looked for the people who we thought both would be qualified candidates.
Right. And now we have too many.
Exactly.
But it's a good, and volunteering people or recruiting people to volunteer is what makes Dover Dover. And so I completely agree with you, John. Thank you to everybody for their willingness to devote some time to the town of Dover, whether they volunteered or were recruited to volunteer on these committees.
Okay.
Yeah. And Bob, I just looked at something while you were saying that about the study committee. This was submitted October 3rd to Ford, and we didn't select the members of this until November.
Yeah.
So
John, I don't know how you keep all this stuff.
Well, I have the stuff, but I don't look at it. John keeps all the stuff in here.
Well, he has it readily available.
Well, yeah,
Right. So
I have a
I don't know,
system.
Chris, do we have to vote or are we good? I think we all agree on the process. Bob's has some work to do.
If you're gonna change the selectmen's liaison, then yeah, vote to that effect.
Okay.
Would be
And
great.
I will make a motion to change the Board of Selectmen liaison for the board. This is like a tongue twister for me. Board of Selectmen membership size study committee review to Bob Springett.
Second,
All in favor?
reluctantly.
Okay, all in favor. I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Sprant.
Hi, John Jeffries.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
And Robin, can I just make one last comment to everybody who's listening and to those that will watch this later, is no member of the Board of Selectmen and James, the proponent of this study request, we're not going to be members of the committee. We are just
Good point.
following this process to get the 7 people together and to let them come up with, we will obviously help with finding the consultant because that's part of our role. But once that's in place, they will be the committee.
No, that's an excellent point, John. I don't think people recognize that. All right, so the next item of business is 1.4, and it is the final project discussion update presented by Mr. Dwelly.
Hopefully it's all done, Chris.
Yeah. There's a few things I'm handing off. Yeah, it's sad to hear that and to realize that it's the last one. So hopefully everyone can see the right screen now this time. As I've done in the past, for the past 3 years, I've given the board a mid-year update on progress of major projects and Board of Selectmen priorities and goals. This year I've done it in a little bit of a different format. And so I've done that so I can just have this act as a cover sheet to the transition document and materials that I'm handing off to Carl. But nevertheless, it still highlights some of the major projects that we have going on. So I won't go line for line, but I would like to take the opportunity, given that it is my last opportunity, to highlight a couple of things. And I think it's important to bring the board up to speed at this point. I will try to go as quickly as possible so that we can get back on track here. So first, under the HR projects, I want to emphasize a couple of things on the classification and compensation update, because that was such a big piece of work and one that we're happy to see through. As you know, the boards voted for it, the personnel boards voted for it, the changes that have been made have been budgeted for FY24. So all those pieces for implementation, for the most part, are in place. There's a few small things that we need to do to kind of tie it up. One is we did receive 3 appeals from 3 staff members about the classification of their position, which is not atypical. And having 3 appeals, in my opinion, actually is a really great thing. And I think it shows, how well the process was conducted. The personnel board shared with me that the last time that this was done, about 25 years ago, they received like 36 appeals on their position. So we've made some improvements in that regard over the past few decades. And then, of course, is that really great bonus program that I'm really happy to have the town support for, that allows, it's a trial program, but it allows staff to be able to earn some additional compensation working on some extra projects. And that just needs to be, that process just needs to be incorporated. Rick's going to be working on these 2 pieces to tie that up over the next couple of months. Lastly, on the HR piece, on the HR projects, I did just want to highlight, we're wrapping up our internal procedures manual for human resources processes, as the board just had a conversation about memorializing your volunteer recruitment process. We've heard that loud and clear, certainly over my time here. We've tried to memorialize as many of our internal processes as possible. Carl's done an incredible job of doing that on the finance side of things. And one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that we had our internal personnel processes memorialized and codified, so that it's just a great manual for Rick and for whoever is hired after Rick and whoever is hired after that. We're really fortunate that this was a quick exercise and is wrapping up. And I think the consultant did a really fabulous job, and it'll be a really great, useful tool for the decades to come. on townwide community projects. I won't speak too much to the details of these as we have a selectman liaison that's leading these efforts. But Hale continues to move forward, I think, in a very productive way. Where we are at is we are reviewing and hopefully finalizing any questions related to the actual draft CR document so that we can present those back to the board. You can be comfortable with it, and then we can release that and move forward with a public education campaign. One thing that Carl and I had talked about, and this was a desire of the board, was for us to be as coordinated as possible with Westwood so that we were all kind of marching toward the same page or down the same path and everyone's on the same page. So we've had some recent conversations that have allowed us to start to align those efforts. So I know Carl's in the process right now of coordinating a meeting where everyone's getting together and just finalizing these kind of last steps so that, again, we're all on the same page and moving down the same path rather than talking in silos so that we can meet our anticipated town meeting deadline that the board identified earlier in the year.
So Chris, do we know, did Westwood make a decision as to whether or not it's on their warrant for their town meeting that's coming up, or if they're going to do a special town meeting?
Yeah, the town manager has communicated to me as recently as this morning that it is not on or going to be on their annual town meeting, their spring annual town meeting this coming spring. It was further communicated to me that there would be a desire from Westwood that the timing of the town meeting be as similar as possible, to the extent possible, so that both communities are moving forward around the same time.
Oh, that's great. So then the Carl and John will sort of coordinate and have those kinds of meetings that you and John had. So that we're all, because those were really helpful.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt this part of it, Robin, but I planned on speaking on our Selectmen's update about conversations that I had a lengthy conversation with the chairman of the board of Westwood last night. So,
Okay.
Specifically regarding Hale and the timing and the hurdles. So, but we can cover that briefly but it's just, it simply echoes exactly what Chris is saying and what his conversations with Chris Campbell have been.
Okay, good.
The Board of Selectmen Side Study Committee, we just talked about. And then lastly, the long-term water sustainability study. Robin, you're the liaison for that. As you know, I think from my perspective, conversations have been very productive with the working group. Our consultant, CDM Smith, has coalesced around the alternatives that the working group has identified as areas that the consultant should illuminate for the community as potential alternatives moving forward. They're going to cost those out and wrap up their final report. I pegged their work at about a 75% completion rate. Over the next few weeks, Carl should be hearing from them with an updated schedule and time frame about the next steps from where we are currently at to wrapping up this process and project. So things are moving forward at a good clip.
Right, and I think it will be really nice to get to be able to present the work to the community. There has been quite a bit of community involvement. There are kind of next steps that we could, as a community, decide to whether or not we want to pursue. But there really certainly is a lot of good information that's come out of that study.
On the IT side of things, we've got a couple of things that are moving along, which are really beneficial to the resiliency of the town's infrastructure. The first is moving our on-premise servers, which operate our machines and host our files, moving those to the cloud so that that data is more easily accessible, but there's also redundancy in terms of protecting it and accessing it. It allows us to remove our on-premise actual hardware down in the server closet that we need to keep essentially refrigerated so that the servers don't overheat. But that's part of the town's modernization efforts around IT. Retrofit's been running that for us, and they're finalizing that now. The next steps is really just to cut over, and there really is no difference from the user experience when people in town are trying to access data or information. On the municipal broadband, as the board knows, we awarded a $115,000 grant from the state to cover the cost of the implementation for that. We had a contract before you maybe 4 weeks ago with Comtrack, the leading provider who does installation for municipal fiber networks. That's ready to go. They've started their mobilization of their crew and laying the groundwork for their effort, but you actually won't see work being done until likely sometime in the summer. There's a massive backlog on the actual fiber cable. And so, the project essentially from stringing it up on the poles is on hold until we receive that. But we've got all the pieces in place needed for that. I've listed out a couple of the IT projects that we have on hold here that'll be taken up by a new team. The townwide document digitization, bringing in DocuSign, and then City Hall systems, moving the Board of Selectmen, the licensing application process, and then the town clerk's services that she provides, from marriage certificates to dog licenses, onto a digital platform. I will say we are looking to move forward in these in pockets of these areas. For instance, Kevin McCabe, our DPW director, has been looking to digitize all of the DPW plans so that they're electronic. So the guidance that we've given departments at this point is that happy to do that if we can move forward on that and it's affordable, but we want to make sure that we're part of the conversation with the vendor so that as we move forward with a town-wide digitization, whatever we've digitized in the past is compatible with whatever system that we choose moving forward in the future. A couple of building projects, the townhouse remodel, we've put on hold, given that we've got some new and wonderful tenants downstairs who've come over from the community center building.
You're going to miss them.
We are going to miss them. My recommendation is that we put the remodel on hold until there's clarity around the direction and the timing for the community center. Alternatively, if somebody else decided that, hey, it makes sense for us to find temporary staff space so that we can move forward now with the townhouse remodel, that would be a decision for someone else to make. But we place that on hold, given that we've got no capacity for flex space at this point to make those remodel changes. The budget is a special article, so that just exists in perpetuity, and we can use that whenever we bring it back up. Townhouse window replacement and roof replacement is all set. We've got contracts in place. We've got the designer and GCs in place. And we had Carl and I had a transition meeting with Carl Warnick this afternoon about the implementation of those. You'll see the construction starting in earnest in the spring.
Right. And I mean, the good news with this is it was $100,000 below, right, where we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, we've got some savings on the roof project, which is always a nice thing to see and have. A couple of public works projects. Kevin gave you a nice update on these a couple of months ago. A few new developments in some of these areas. Claybrook Road, they're in the final stages of design and permitting. We continue to knock on the State House doors in hopes that we can incentivize our leadership at the State House to fund the earmark to pay for the construction. As a backup, we have put that in as a funding request for this year's capital. We view that as a priority to get completed in the next year. Center Street Bridge, Kevin did great work on getting this on the state list to get the construction funded. It is on there. That's great. Also good news is that we were just notified by our congressman that Dover's received $2 million to pay for the design costs. We understand that will fully fund the design effort for that bridge project. So that's a huge win. That's a huge award. And that, unlike the Claybrook Road project, that $2 million has been funded, has been signed, and that's money coming to the town.
Right. And Chris, I think just to have that sink in, a huge thanks to you and Kevin for really driving this. I mean, this is a huge amount of money. There was coordination with our neighboring town. You know, your both of your efforts are not unnoticed here. So really, thank you to both of you.
Appreciate that. And then
It was a nice parting gift.
a nice parting gift. And then Willow Street, the feasibility continues on that effort, and funding for design, which would be the next phase, has been included in the capital budget. There's also state funds as well as potential grant funding that'll be pursued for that as well. And then the last few miscellaneous projects, you guys have seen a lot of Bill Solomon over the past couple of months, so you're pretty well aware of where things are at here. But he's been organizing the 3 telecom providers on the tower to finalize the last steps. They want to swap out some equipment, just upgrades. Doesn't change the actual dimensions on the tower, but there needs to be coordination related to that. There's also the potential where they'll need to go back before the planning board for a special permit for those new leases as well. So good news here is that we do have an additional space, and we have been contacted by Dish Wireless, who has expressed interest in being on the tower. We've got to run a procurement process to solicit carriers who want to come on the tower, and we're planning on doing that in the next month. So hopefully that results in another carrier on the tower, better coverage in town, and more revenue coming in to the town. Cable license, Comcast is all set. He's working on the final pieces for Verizon. It's going to follow the same process. It'll likely be the same deal that was worked out with Comcast. That needs to wrap up before December of 2023. And then the DPW solar array, 75% of the site work is complete. If anyone's been down there, you've seen the transformer pad, you've seen all the conduit and the ballasts that have been placed. They're just waiting on a AC combiner panel, which has been delayed to put that in. And they're anticipating go live sometime in late winter, early spring, which would be great to get that online. So this by no means is an exhaustive list of everything that is going on in town. It doesn't cover every department or board and committee, but these have been, generally speaking, priorities for the board, which is why they're included here in this document. So as I mentioned, I've got a pretty comprehensive portfolio of materials that are being passed over to Carl. I've spent the past 6 weeks sitting with him and bringing him into a lot of these meetings. So I won't speak for him, but I think we've done a pretty good job of having Carl be ready to take these and just continue on and see him to the finish line.
And of course, you're just a phone call away.
And I'm always just a phone call away.
Or a
Well,
Zoom
he's coming to
call.
town meeting if we give him a badge or a wristband. Where's Felicia? She's still on the call. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
You got it.
Great update. The next item of business is a traffic sign inventory professional services agreement. And I believe Kevin is going to present this. Kevin, are you awake?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
good.
delayed. So while that glitches, I guess I can just begin to talk.
Oh, there you are. You were blank for a second.
Yeah, Chris, I need you to get me a new computer before you leave, I guess.
Oh, you have to be nice to Carl.
Yeah, we'll chat next week, Carl. Yeah, so tonight is just, I'm looking for the board's approval to engage in a contract with Beta. Beta's already working in town. This is a continuation of the asset management of inventory work we have going on town-wide. They're currently doing sidewalks for us, guardrail, and they conducted over the summer a pavement management study that Bob presented on my behalf in September. So that work is still finishing up. So this had come kind of to light when I was kind of reviewing the bylaws and trying to find more information on the signs. So part of this work will be, obviously the asset management where they inventory it, and we'll actually have, Excel spreadsheets, but more importantly, GIS data that'll all hone in on one online hub. So it would have all the road, conditions, the guardrails, the locations conditions, and then furthermore, the signs. So this isn't necessarily an initiative to install more signs in Dover by any means, but just to bring up to modern day standards, the existing signage we do have. As I drive all over town, there's several signs that aren't proper compliance by reflectivity standards and or sizing. So part of that, they'll identify all that, present us with a capital plan so that my team at the DPW can capital plan and prioritize what we need to do. And another aspect to this will be kind of a cross-reference. I've worked with Mona and Felicia to try to get those documents for regulatory signs such as stop and speed signs, which need to be voted by you all as the Board of Selectmen, as the local executive body of the town. And so part of this, I imagine I'll be coming back with basically a master list of all stop signs in town, looking for kind of a sign off so that we do have those in the archives, if you will.
But this is for every single sign in the town of Dover, any single traffic type sign?
Correct. Public owned sign, street sign, speed sign, stop sign, yield.
1,500 unique sign panels?
That's just a guesstimate. I don't know the arithmetic with how they came up with that. I think it'd be a little bit closer to probably 1,200, 1,300.
It's a lot in either way.
Yeah. So this will kind of put some bolster to my increased request to warrant for our sign line and our operating budget.
Wow.
So Kevin, I don't mean to be flip.
Oh, yes, she does.
I'm just
Yes, she
wondering,
does.
what's the benefit of doing this? I mean, so
it's simply, it's an asset the town owns that we don't know about. We don't have records. So that's kind of the main premise. And the second premise, probably, you're probably more concerned about the asset, but obviously from, having to adhere to federal guidelines of the manual uniform traffic control devices and stuff like that. If we don't have signage that's compliant, I think kind of the nth extreme would be, could jeopardize federal funding if we're not complying. So, I think all those things kind of coincide together.
right. I mean, I never really thought of signs. When I first looked at this, I was just thinking traffic lights, and I'm like, we have 4. And then I realized the extent, and then I realized the extent of what this was trying to cover. And then I was trying to figure out, why are we doing this? So that, okay, so I get it.
If I could just add that this also falls in line quickly to your question, Robin, about our, as we talk about digitization, this is a big part of it. Very similar to when we digitized all of our water assets. A lot of this stuff is unknown, and we had a water break and we didn't really know where to go, right? Or we didn't know where the stops were. So this helps with us actually having a digital record of this particular asset.
So this is just part of modernization.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's many other areas in the town where we have assets that we have no clue of their age, their replacement cycle.
Bob, we're not included in this digitized asset list.
No?
Oh, we are.
I thought that was so funny. I guess it fell short, but
No, I got it.
It's 2 out of 3. That's good enough for meatloaf. So I think that we really, at some point in time, we really need to make sure that we do have an inventory of all the town's assets, which go way beyond just the highway equipment and now signs and fire equipment and EMT equipment. It includes software. Southwest got into trouble because their software was out of date. So as we move into the digital world, we have to think much more expansive about what town assets are and what kind of systems that we use to log, maintain inventory information, so we don't get into situations where we have 50-year-old fire equipment, and 40-year-old trucks being replaced. I mean, that's the past. We really need to move forward, and it really should be something that our interim town manager and follow-on people actually focus on.
You know, it's interesting, Bob, that you say that, because there are apps on your phone that, and certainly by I know of from bike riding and running, that you can they tell you right where traffic signs are, where there's merge signs on your bicycle if you're riding on the road, blah blah blah, one way, all these things that you literally can get on Strava or on an app, and yet we don't have them in the town. So,
well, John, they're also there on boats.
Yeah, they're exactly.
You could look at rocks.
Look at rock. Oh, be quiet. That's not nice. That was an inside joke for everybody that he's.
I'm going to show everybody the picture.
No, he's just being mean to me. Don't pay any attention to him. Kevin, thank you. Don't pay attention to Bob. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good segue for a future discussion item that I'll be to the board, in front of the board for next month. DEP Dover was successful in August submitting for a grant for asset management through the state revolving fund. It's a 60%, 40%. They provide 60% funding, and the town has to do 40%, and that's also for asset management. But that would include GIS for structures, the outfalls, drainage conveyance, so the actual pipes connecting it, the how deep the catch basins are, the conditions, and also the culverts as well. And part of that work that they'll be putting together, the design engineer would have a kind of critical failure, so that would help kind of prioritize our department's needs for what culverts that we need to prioritize for the replacements.
And Kevin, does Tate and Howard, who's helping us with Center Street and Walpole and Clayburgh, do they do that type? Are they set up to do that type of work, or is that a different type of engineering?
So they've done some work for us as part of the NIPID's permit, the MS4. So part of the regulations for that, we do have outfall structures mapped, but all the other, culverts and all that are still unknown, if you will.
We have a lot of them.
It's estimated at 61, but from doing this in another community, I can guarantee you they will find more when they're there. So.
Yeah. Bob's got 2 under his driveway.
I'm sure they're out of the public right away. So.
Touche, John. Touche.
All right. So thank you for the explanation. So are funds available for this, or is this a reserve transfer, or?
Funds are available.
Okay. So then I move to authorize the town administrator to execute all documents related to the traffic sign inventory professional services agreement between Dover and the Beta Group, Inc.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
Aye, Bob Springer.
Aye, John Jeffries.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you to the board.
Okay, item number 1.6, our ambulance rates discussion and a potential vote. And Carl, you're going to be presenting this.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is an agenda item that comes before the board every year, once a year. Following the Medicare makes a change in what they will reimburse for ambulance rates. So for those individuals that we transport in our ambulance that are covered by Medicare, the town then bills Medicare for that ambulance run. And so again, every year Medicare makes a change and adjustment in those rates. This year they've authorized a 6.4% increase in ambulance billing rates. So that's, we show what that would be for our different types of ambulance runs, BLS, ALS 1 and 2, SCT, and mileage, the mileage fee. What the new proposed rate would be if you improve the 6.4%. And then we also provide just a comparison of how Dover's rates are compared to 50 other communities that are managed by our billing company. And you can see we're in a good position. I mean, we're not at the top of the list in terms of billing the maximum amount, but we're certainly at a very appropriate amount in terms of what we bill for ambulance fees.
So John, this is your bailiwick, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Carl, thank you. I thought that when we started to address this a couple of years back, we were trying to get to the mean, to the average.
Mhm.
Was my memory is wrong? Because, you know, our proposed rates are a couple $100 below the average of the 50 Comstar municipalities. Am I misremembering that?
No, that's correct.
So then should we have a plan as we go through this on an annual basis to try to get closer to the average?
What happens is we do have that plan. We have been executing that towards that plan, but the other towns have been raising their rates faster.
So we need to bump up the increases?
Well, the theory is that if we continue along the rates that we have and the other towns their increases are not going to sustain the way they have been, and that our increases are very predictable and very consistent over the several years.
So then steady as she goes, we're not.
Yeah, so that's what, yes, exactly right. So what happens is you'll see times where we're in the 80 percentile, and then there are times when we're in the 70 percentile, and then there's times we're in the 90 percentile. So that if Chris, if I've misspoken on that, or Carl, because Carl, we actually did this with you twice.
Yeah, and as you point out, we've made up a lot of that gap from 4 years ago when the board first looked at this in a comprehensive way. We've closed that gap substantially. That we were very low back then.
Right.
So Bob, to your observation is 100% correct, and it's just a matter of I would say my assumption is inflation has increased other towns that have done this prior to us, the last year specifically. So that's the mathematical rationale for where we are relative to the group.
No, I was just concerned that I wanted to make sure I remembered correctly, and then I wanted to make sure that the process was actually moving forward, and it is. So that's good.
You know, remember, we bill these rates. There's a percentage of transfers every year that are uncollectible.
Yep.
In a couple of months, that'll come back to us from the last fiscal year of uncollectibles, and that number has really never changed from year to year. It's a couple $1,000s every year.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Sorry, Robin.
No worries. So are there any more questions? I think that was a good question because it was a big reminder. So if there's no additional discussion, then I move to approve a 6.4% increase in Dover's current ambulance rates for 2023.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
Hi, John Jeffries.
All right.
And Robin, I just wanted to say thank you to Chief Lutazzi, to all the members of the ambulance, of our crew. We have actually a very busy crew for a very small town with a volunteer staff. We do a lot of transfers for a town our size, and it's just we get really glowing reports back from people who've been transported. One of my friends who lives on Dedham Street had to be transported right before Christmas, and she sent me an email. I should forward it on to you all. I forwarded it on to the chief, and she had Nevin Weinberg and his crew, and she actually knew the three people who came into the house. So it's a bit reassuring when literally your neighbors and friends of your kids come to help you. So she was really, really pleased, and they do a great job. So just a thank you and well done to the chief.
Right, thank you. All right, so the next item on the agenda is 1.7, and that is the draft of the Board of Selectmen's town report. And Chris, I believe this is delayed.
Perhaps you could say it is delayed. This is an update to let the board know that this will be coming to you at a future meeting. We're going to have, or the plan is, Carl might change this, but to have our new management fellow who's coming in take a first pass at drafting out the town report. Good exercise to really dig in, get an understanding of what's been going on the past year and the structure of the town. So given the timing, we don't anticipate being delayed, but I just wanted to share that, we had this on the agenda, and I just wanted to share that that was the planned path forward for this.
So there's a deadline though, right? Wasn't there a presentation about the deadline to get the town report materials in and over to the printer and things like that?
Yeah, and we still anticipate meeting that deadline.
Okay.
So actually, I'm going to make Mona get off mute because she passed me a note today, which I lost. And it was basically, I had suggested to Kathy Weld, who heads this up, that we make reminders at the Board of Selectmen's meeting about the deadline. And Mona gave me a sticky note. And so now, Mona, you are going to have to tell the Dover citizens, remind them what the deadline is for the town report, because I lost the sticky note.
Okay, the deadline for the town report submission is January 9th.
Okay. So Chris, are we going to make January 9th?
4 days.
Monday.
We will make the date such that it will not impact the town report committee's operations,
Okay.
putting together the full town report.
Okay. All right. So just a reminder to all those committees out there, your report is due on Monday. So have fun this weekend. And remember to put it in the format that the town report committee requested, because it takes a lot of work on their behalf if you don't do it in the right format. And Kathy, I see you're on the phone. Is there anything you want on the call? Is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't need to add anything. I think that was very nice of you to make that announcement.
Okay.
And I'm also glad for the advance notice that that your report will be probably a little bit tardy.
Right.
As long as it's not a month behind schedule, I can't take that, but we'd love to have it sometime next week if we could.
Do you want Chris's number? I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
All right.
Because there's always a lot of back and forth, as you know, questions
Right.
and so forth, you know.
Right.
So lots to be done. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to your committee. Okay, so then item 1.8 is just all of us, and it's our updates. So I'll start the water committee. We've made a lot of progress. We will get a report out to the community, and then, be really excited to get feedback and to socialize what is in that report for the community so that we can determine what our next steps are. It's been a really great process, and I really feel as though CDM Smith was a good fit for the town to do this project.
And good.
That's great. Great. Want me to go next, Robin?
Sure.
So let's start with Hale and open space. So as we discussed a little bit earlier during Chris's review, I have had lengthy conversations with Westwood, and we are, in fact, the town of Dover, are way ahead of where Westwood is just in terms of our organization, our outreach, the community involvement, where we stand. As Chris mentioned, and I confirmed with Rob Gotti last night that there will not be an article on their warrant. It will be, they are looking at, just as we are, for a fall town meeting, a separate town meeting. We had a lively discussion with regards to Hale, in the involvement and all the levels of the community that are going to be involved and affected by the Hale opportunity. In light of, as we've discussed at this board and in open space, where the opportunity the town of Newton has to purchase 20 acres of land for $25 million. The amount of money the amount of money that we're being offered this conservation restriction for is absolutely the deal of the century, relatively speaking, dollar-wise. We do recognize it's still a lot of money and it affects a lot of taxpayers. So back to Westwood and Rob and where they are, as I said, we are significantly ahead. They are moving as fast as they can. They're constrained with lots of things as we are. But we are definitely on the same page. As Chris mentioned earlier, there is a movement for us, the town of Dover and the town of Westwood, to get together with the trustees to all make sure we're on the same page. In light of that, tomorrow, I am meeting with DA and Rob Warren from the trustees of the reservation. So Carol Lisbon, who is on the call, and Amy, who's also on this call this evening, both were on open space and one of the things that Carol mentioned is we really do not have a plan B. What happens if we get to a special town meeting and we don't have a plan B? One of the things she did immediately suggest is, have we given thought to a bylaw where the planning board or the board of selectmen proposes a bylaw to address development along open space areas? And I'm paraphrasing that. I don't want to put words into Carol's mouth, but essentially her message was loud and clear. What's our plan B? Because right now we don't have one. And I can assure you, Carol and Bob and Robin, I asked Rob Gotti last night, do they have a plan B? And he said, we are moving heaven and earth to work on our plan A. So no, they do not have a plan B either. So
that zoning bylaw is something that we should look at regardless of what happens to Dover, to Hale, because it could be applicable, to other parcels of land. But unfortunately, we have a lot of things on the agenda at this current town meeting. So maybe that's something we can work with the planning board on for a future town meeting, because it is a good idea.
It is a good idea, as one of the members asked Carol point blank, why hasn't the planning board thought of this or brought it forward for this particular town meeting? And Carol's answer, and again, I don't want to put words in Carol's mouth, but essentially her answer was, the planning board has its hands full, and the planning board has, as you just saw earlier, five articles.
Has its hands full.
Yeah. And the planning board, as does we, have the common theme of tonight is we, the Board of Selectmen, have our hands completely full with all of these items. To add one more to this warrant would probably not be the best use of anyone's time, but to add it to the supplemental warrant, which is going to address Carol, is certainly a possibility. So that's something for our consideration. So that has been this week in Hale, and I have been involved in a meeting every day this week with Hale, and I will be, as I said, tomorrow meeting with DA and Rob with regards to the trustees' involvement. And specifically, I'm going to suggest that we together look to a communication consultant to help us with this messaging. Carol and I had the conversation today. We, this Board of Selectmen, on this forum in the past, have had that conversation. I think it's something that can really help. It's very typically small money for the amount of work and for the communication process that you accomplish. So there will be more discussion most likely next week, the week after when we get back, because I really do want to get DA's input and Rob's input before I make a recommendation, Robin, back to our board.
Right, and I mean, this was DA's, she did PR prior to taking on her role at trustee, so, you know, she can certainly help and volunteer to help, but she also may be able to introduce us to consultants that might be able to help.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I was thinking, Robin, and that's sort of the discussion that is going to be a big topic of discussion tomorrow, but also that we, the Board of Selectmen, really do need some resource like that. Bob has talked about it in the modernization process. We have talked about it with Carol. We've talked about it in many different steps along the way, that we really do need, with all the openings that we have and the steps that we have to take to fill those openings. We need to have professionals, and we need to have these temporary professionals to come in to help us with these laser focused strategic initiatives that we have in front of us. So,
you know, and maybe this is a cost sharing with Westwood, because the initial story is the same, and it may be important to have similar communications about Hale and the value proposition, because they are similar for both towns, and then they diverge.
correct. Yeah.
So if I might interrupt John for a sec, you really have to, yes, you need to think about this as a coordinated campaign. You need to have professionals who know how to do the marketing and of the campaign, and the work, all of the work needs to be coordinated, and it needs to be consistent, and in order to be effective in both towns. And one of my questions was around communications, because Amy Moot had raised the question, sent us an email about that, John, and I'm assuming you're going to address that soon, right? And she was looking for some direction about who was on first and how things are going to be done.
I believe that in the meeting before Christmas, we had a meeting with trustees, and trustees volunteered, i.e. DA, to take a first pass at what a communication might look like, and then share it with, they were suggesting the joint task force. So I think it's a matter of following up on that, and then, having the conversation, should we hire an external consultant?
Exactly, Robin, that's exactly part of the conversation that I had with Rob last night, and it's going to be the focus of the conversation tomorrow with DA. And Bob, to the point of the things that we have done extremely well, have had deep coordination, deep outroots, grassroots development. And in the month of December, just literally in the month of December, I have been a part of 3 meetings, 3 gatherings, if you will, that were focused only on Hale. And that is critically important to the success of this campaign. What we're realizing is there's literally no one that we can go to inside the townhouse of Dover to say, other than Mona and Carl Valenti, we need help with this, whatever this is. We don't have anyone other than Carl and Mona. So we definitely have to have outside laser focused professionals that can really help us with these tasks in front of us.
Well, I mean, we talked to Eric Arnold about this, and I think we agreed to disagree. He doesn't think it needs to be a coordinated effort between Dover and Westwood, but it does, because each town at their town meeting is going to be asking, what's the other town doing?
Yep.
So, but at the end of the day, the value proposition is almost identical for both towns. The
Right.
cost may be different given services. So, and this is not going anywhere without communication. And if we don't have a good, effective communication plan, it's going to be very, very difficult. to
And
get
execution. The plan is one thing, but you got to execute.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, correct. It's, the conversation last night with Rob was sparked by Carol asking me the question at open space of what's plan B? We don't have one, we need one. What's Westwood's? And is this
Well, more importantly, John, what's Hales?
what's Hales? That's the Robin, it leads right back to that question of, and how I answered that is Hale's plan B is Hale needs the money. And that is what
They can sell
Aaron
land.
made very clear, crystal clear to us. They need the money, and their trustees, their board of directors thinks this is the amount of money they're asking for is not enough. They are seeing what's happening around them, and they're rethinking that is the $10 million enough. So the window on that is going to close quickly. So back to the conversation with Rob last night. So that is a continuing, ongoing, in-depth communication with it, where Chris Dwelly began with Chris Campbell, and I and Chris began with Rob and Chris this summer. So that's going to continue. Westwood is welcoming it. Westwood is open to it. Westwood agrees, Robin, with what you said and what Chris said earlier. It's got to be a coordinated effort. One hand has to know what the other hand is doing. And that's going to remain the case. We're going to keep that level of transparency. So the final thing is on open space. In our open space discussion, as you said, Robin, Amy and open space really, really want to be a big part of this, and they will be a big part of this. We really need them to be a big part of it. So we have to be able to have anybody we bring in also understand what open space role is. And then right back to Carol Lisbon, how do we also develop a plan B that can be compatible with what we want to do with the CR, and get the CR ready so it can be distributed to everyone. One of the things that we have not done that Chris answered this week, we haven't distributed the CR because it wasn't ready for distribution. We have to get it ready for distribution, and it has to be available so people can really understand it.
Right. I mean, there are a couple of professionals in Dover that could be helpful looking at it.
Yeah, it is. We're going to have another conversation with Carl, with our with our council, to make sure that we're comfortable, and we really want to get that document to where we're very comfortable sending it outside of the walls of the townhouse. So those are my updates. It was a combination. It was long, but there was just there's been a lot of activity. We've put a lot of time and effort into this.
Thank you. So you hit a couple of themes that I want to sort of emphasize. From my perspective, looking at where we sit on the communication side in town, I think we need to have someone who can take over management of the website. I think that has to get done. At one point in time, there was a redo of the website design. I don't know where that stands, if it's been postponed, if it's been just suspended. But there's work that needs to be done there. There's work that needs to be done on communications from the Board of Selectmen. If we're asked to write things like project updates for newsletters, et cetera, then we need to have some way of doing that, other than sort of getting pinged by people and then pinging other people. So at one point in time, we had talked about, going all the way back to Chris's hire, that the ATA position was going to do a lot more around communication.
Hey, so you know what, Bob? It's really late. This is supposed to be a Board of Selectmen's update.
This is an update. This is an update on staffing.
Well, I think these are critical points, but what I was going to suggest is that maybe, we have an agenda item and the points and talk to Carl about how to move some of these things forward.
Okay, so then I'll just mention the topics.
Okay,
Staffing, we need somebody to do internal communication. We need to find a way of replacing Dave. He left in July because, there's just no one to do the work and move that stuff forward. I think we need to have a real serious conversation about onboarding for staff and making sure that people who report to independently elected boards who only meet monthly, how the staff onboarding process for people who report to those groups get managed. I also think that at one point in time, we talked about a warrant article bylaw change, since this seems to be the year of the bylaw, to change the bylaw so that we don't have employees reporting to independently elected boards and commissions, so that we can be consistent in reviewing of personal performance and in doing compensation. So those things have all been sort of pushed aside, and I think that the time is now, and it's serious, to sort of get some of this stuff done as we go through this, what's turning out to be a pretty massive transition. In terms of Carroll, the community center, I mean, there's work being done on two things. One is getting out the documents for pre-qualification of bidders. That's moving along, and in tandem with that, there is the work being done by the architects and their help to quote value engineer or redesign the stuff that we talked about back in November. The critical deadline is around mid-July, mid-January to get this stuff finalized so it could be posted.
does it look like they're going to hit it?
It's going to be close.
Okay.
I mean, this has been a really tight exercise. So yeah, it's going to be close. We'll see. I'll definitely know by next time. There's a meeting next week, I think, to sort of finalize some of this work. And if that happens, then we're 3 or 4 days within what the timeline was.
Okay, good.
All right.
Robin, can I mention one more thing in the update column? Chris and I met with Kevin today and the police union and the police union's representatives, and that we had a very substantive, lengthy discussion today at the townhouse. We have another meeting on the agenda for Friday, January 20th, and that's moving along. That's moving along so far with no.
Okay.
There's nothing to report other than we're making good progress.
So I do have one more thing, and that is thank you to the Chickering students who sent us those lovely cards over the holiday.
This is a good opportunity to say you got the Grinch, Robin got the Grinch, you got the
I got snow globe.
I got Santa Claus.
Chris and I got Grinches.
So the kids must know who has the big bucks.
I got Santa. Thank you, Mrs. Grady.
Okay, and then I know Mona's been trying to reschedule the January 19th meeting because there's a conflict. She tried to do it for Wednesday, the 18th, but I have school negotiations on that night. So I would like to try get a meeting on Thursday night during that week. So I don't know if maybe we could try for Tuesday night.
Didn't you suggest Tuesday? Of that?
I can't remember, but Mona, maybe if you could try again tomorrow.
I'll
So-
send out a memo.
Okay. And now it also looks like Thursday, February 2nd, that date needs to be changed as well.
Yeah, I'm out of pocket that day on the 2nd.
Okay, all right. All right, and now item 1.9, and this is the final town administrator update to be provided by Mr. Dwelly.
Last one. So just want to share with the board that the request for quotes has gone out for the two executive recruitment firms for the town administrator search. The response deadline is next Friday. So the timing is such that should we get responses back you'd be able to review and potentially vote on a selection at your next meeting, whenever that may be, that week of the 17th. So that's moving on. Other than that, I covered a lot of the projects earlier. And I know we've had, as I wrap up here, I know we had an opportunity to talk about this a lot, had an opportunity to see everyone during the farewell this afternoon, which I really appreciate. But just again, and for the record, I just want to share with the board that this has been a once in a lifetime opportunity and a tremendous professional experience for me. I've had a wonderful time here, and I can't thank the board enough for the faith that you put in me and the partnership that we've had over the past 3.5 years. I think we've been really successful and have been able to accomplish a lot that the board was looking to do as you went out to search 4 years ago. And I'm just really appreciative and thankful for the board, the community, and I'll miss it.
Right, and Chris, I feel as though I've been saying a lot of goodbyes over the last couple of days to you, but again, I just wanted to emphasize what a pleasure it has been working with you. You came into Dover and you really helped us begin to change and modernize the community. And we are very thankful to you for the vigor in which you attacked the task. Certainly there's always things that we can still do, but if we take a look back, we really accomplished a lot, and we did it as a team. And you built a team. Some of the team members have moved on, and we have the opportunity to build a new team. And we are. I personally, and I think John and Bob feel the same way. Really appreciate the support and the opportunity to have worked with you. We took a chance, and I would say it was an excellent decision on our part. So thank you for everything. And I really am sad to see you go, but your new town is very lucky to get you. And I wish you a lot of success and I hope you achieve whatever it is you want.
Appreciate that.
And I second everything that Robin said, but it is with sadness. There's no question about that. And looking back over the 4 years, you were a rookie. I was a rookie on the Board of Selectmen. And the thing that I think, you don't get work that we were able to get done together without strong friendships and relationships that I hope build into friendships.
Well, we had fun along the way, even though it took a long time to loosen Chris up, because he was very serious. And I give Mona the credit for this. Mona, thank you. I go in there and there was a list and it was boom, 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 boom.
You were always late signing.
Right. I was like, does this guy have a sense of humor? And thank you to Mona. She brought it out.
Well, we do have a good time in the office. That's for sure.
So keep the relationships and the friendships and all the best going forward.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob.
So Chris, you were exactly what we needed. You were exactly what we wanted. And everything that Robin and Bob have said have been a result of the culture that you cultivated. And to have an opportunity to do what you did at the age and stage you were, I'm just so happy for you and all the cool things that you've done for us, with us, all the things that you've been a part of.
Despite us.
Despite
the success he had in spite of the Board of Selectmen.
Despite our advanced age, our lack of technical expertise, all the Robin's dog barking in the background.
Chewing his bone.
Chewing his bone. Yeah, I can't imagine. I often think that this could be a sitcom, that if you just took the last 4 years of your life and just ran it'd be a bestseller. But in seriousness, I've told you all the really important personal things And you know that this is a chapter in your life that it's going to be an opportunity for you to come back to time and time and time again, because you'll always have us. We're, regardless of what happens, we're for better or worse.
We're not living forever, John, just letting you know.
Exactly. I know, but you'll have us. And I really believe that you were the best thing that happened to us over these past 4 years. So thank you. I am going to take you up on that boat ride offer. Even do not listen to Bob. I might have hit one rock. And it might have broken my propeller and destroyed the boat. But
I'll text you the picture, Chris.
it's fixed. Yeah.
I've seen the picture. You can come along, John. I won't let you drive though.
It's just not fair. Chris, we are here always for you, and I'm really just proud of everything you did. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, John. And likewise, anything that comes up, anything you guys need, you know how to find me. Happy to help out at any time.
We appreciate that. So on a final note, the mundane consent agenda. So the consent agenda consists of the following: the approval of the 2023 IRS mileage reimbursement rate from 62.5 cents to 65.5 cents per mile. On December 29th, the IRS issued the 2023 optional standard mile rate to calculate the deductible cost for the purposes, and the town adopts these rates as issued by the IRS. And then the next item is the approval of 2023 special one-day liquor licenses for January. And Chris, we apologize for not getting one for your farewell party so that we could crack a bottle of champagne. But those are for January 14th, 21st, 27th, 28th, February 4th, 10th, 2 on February 11th, 1 on the 14th, that would be Valentine's Day, 1 on the 18th, 1 on the 25th, 1 on March 4th, and 1 on March 11th. So I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor? I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springett.
I, John Jeffries.
And with that last item of business, I make a motion to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springett.
I, John Jeffries.
And Chris, we wish you the best, and please stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you
You
again.
will
Thank you.
always be fondly remembered in the town of Dover.
I appreciate
Thank you.
that. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Good-
you. Thank
Thanks
you all.
again, Chris.
Good night.